The point of no return. Diablo 4 Season 2, the Season of Blood, is coming, and the reason why is the point of no return is that they cannot mess this up. It's the last straw. People will actually abandon Diablo 4 in favor of Path of Exile or maybe something else, but this cannot stand. Listen, you might have seen the 5 new bosses, the gems won't take stash space, and a lot of other changes that are coming, and you might think, hey, this is good. It's good, but it's actually not good. I will tell you why it's not good, and I will tell you why if the other things as well that people have been requesting will not be fixed, it's the end for Diablo 4. But first of all, let's actually talk about the 5 new dungeon bosses, because this is the leading factor into the recent tweet, because at Gamescom, which happened just recently, it was just the trailer. And on their channel, you just see the trailer of the Season of Blood. It doesn't really tell you anything except for the fact that instead of having malignant, corrupted stuff, we just have vampires now, which is whatever. Diablo vampires, sure. But there are a couple of things that have been addressed that people have been asking for. The bosses is one thing, because we have so many dungeons. What is it, 120 or whatever it is, and we only have just a couple of bosses that just rotate through the dungeons, and that's boring. 5 new bosses is good. It's nowhere near enough to actually supplement the amounts of replayability that endgame has. Let's just say that 5 bosses is enough, although I am still waiting for when they will add campaign bosses, because this is the first Diablo game that I am not actually able to kill campaign bosses. This is not something new. This is not something original. This has to be in the game. What do you mean I cannot fight Andariel, Duriel? I cannot fight Lilith again. Well, Uber Lilith, sure. But farming specific bosses for specific items is a core aspect of RPGs and Diablo as well. And we've had this in the past, and it's missing from the game. Not to mention that they did address the better targeting of uniques and Uber uniques as also a part of the season upgrade, which is great, but this doesn't mean anything because we don't know what that means. Is it an increase in drop chance? Do certain specific bosses drop these, or do specific dungeons drop these, or do they drop higher in hell tides, or do they drop higher at world bosses? We don't know yet. It kind of depends on how it's going to be implemented, and I'm pretty sure that they might not know how it's going to be implemented anyway, and it's likely that they're pretty flexible on how they're going to implement this, considering how flexible they are with all of the changes that they've announced for Season 2. Another change, which is the gems will not take stash space, which initially they announced to be in Season 3 or onwards, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Season 3 and onwards. This is good, obviously, because god damn it, so much stash issue, but this should have been in the game. This is, okay, we can be happy about it, but this is not a point of celebration. This is like, alright man, I paid you a premium price for a premium ARPG that should not have stash issues, but it does, and this fixes it. But there's still the question of what is this new Seasons of Blood going to bring? Is it going to bring a collectible loot type system like the Malignant Hearts, which are going to still take a lot of unnecessary space in our stash? Because if that's going to happen, then we need to address that as well, because we're just going from one shitty issue to one less shitty issue until we cover all of them, because they do have to be covered, and they did essentially prove to you that they can actually cover all of these shitty issues, and that's probably best described with the Renown changes. In Season 2, all of the Renown will be account-wide. Everything, all the way up to your extra Paragon points, will be transferable directly on your day 1 of the Season 2, if you of course have unlocked them outside of the Season 2, right? I would imagine Season 1 counts, but of course in Eternal Realm as well. So that's yay, finally. And when you think about the trajectory of their, let's say, caving in on the Renown issue, initially we were supposed to still farm Altars of Lilith. Do you remember that? Because I do. But then they caved in and said, okay, listen, you're not gonna have to farm for Altars of Lilith anymore. You're gonna get the Renown back. But then the question was like, okay, how much Renown are we actually talking about? Am I gonna unlock all the bonuses? Like, no, you're not gonna unlock all the bonuses in Season 1. You're just gonna get, you know, the skill points and the first bit of gold. And like, all right. And now we're getting all of it. So clearly they can actually implement the entirety of the player feedback and actually give it to us as well, which is, you know, part and parcel with the stash issue that also comes together with the announced stash filter and search options, which is something that's so highly necessary, because Diablo 4 doubles down on the type, or triples down on the type of items that you have to collect. First of all, you have to collect your actual items. Let's put both legendaries and yellow items that you're using for legendaries in the same boat, right? You're collecting items, then you're collecting aspects which need a storage space, which is super limited, and then you're collecting sigils, nightmare sigils for nightmare dungeons, because that's the only content that you end up doing in endgame as well. And we have less space than in previous Diablo games that also collected all of these as well. So it's okay, it's fine, it's not enough, but you can actually search them, which is a good addition considering that you have so many aspects with so many different names and so many sigils with so many different names and so many legendaries with so many different names, but they share icons from a pool of 5 or 6 or 7 for each category, right? Aspects have the offensive, defensive, resource, and utility icons. Is like 4 types, right? So all of the offensive aspects look the exact same in your bag, so you don't know which is which, so you have to cycle through all of them individually. Same with items, same with sigils as well. It's the exact same thing, right? It's not enough because we have so many of them, and this filter option has to be addressed more, has to be addressed for the open world as well. There's so many locations, so many dungeons, so much stuff that if you don't right-click your nightmare sigil to point you to the dungeon, or click in the codex on the aspect to put a little marker on what dungeon you need to go, you don't know where each dungeon is each. And if you do know, I call bullshit, because there's over 100 dungeons and all of them have so many different names that it's practically improbable for you to remember all of the dungeons by point with the exact location in the world. You don't have to. That shouldn't be a thing. That's just silly. But there should be a way for you to, like, okay, I need Hoarfrost Demise or whatever. I know where to find it. I go, okay, there it is, right? The system of Diablo of keeping you busy every second of the game, of individually hovering over your cursor over each item to figure out what that item is. Sure, there's some mild semi-filtering options, like, okay, if it's a Hauser dungeon, it's probably going to be down to the south, to the west, east, west, east. That's fine. I know these coordinations. So that needs to be expanded even more. And who knows, maybe this can actually be expanded into an overlaid map, which is again something that people have been asking for, which is again something that ARPGs naturally have at the launch of the game. Not something like, hey, listen guys, this new season is gonna bring you overlaid maps. Come on, dude. Really? And speaking of Season 2, we're gonna have, obviously, the season mechanic, which we don't know what it is yet. Probably going to be announced soon. But also, we're gonna have additional endgame challenges. Now, this could be either good or bad in the sense that it's so not enough. Challenges doesn't really tell us anything. Challenges can be a whole new end game content that we can engage with, or it could be just some bullshit events out in the world that you do every now and again, or like a different version of Hell Tides, which is fine for a little bit, but it doesn't have that much replayability. And it's good that we're getting new content. We should have new content because there's not much to do once you're past level 60, 70. Sure, you do a Hell Tide every now and again, but most likely you're just non-stop, mindlessly 24/7 farming nightmare dungeons. Which is not necessarily a problem, but if you think of another Diablo title that had you have to farm XP over and over again, that is Diablo 2. And Diablo 2 didn't have restrictions on where you can find that XP. Sure, certain zones and certain acts had better XP for you, but you can essentially, there were farming spots if you were in Hell. You can go all the way to Nightmare, like a difficulty previous. You don't go from World Tier 4 to World Tier 3 because something in World Tier 3 was better to be farmed, right? You're pretty narrowed down in one direction. I'm not knocking down on Nightmare dungeons. They're very fun, and I enjoy my time, but if you play this in semi-hardcore fashion, you're gonna get turbo bored. And we see this because right now the Diablo 4 player base is mostly comprised of hardcore players. Hardcore in the sense that people that really like the game and really like to give it their all. The majority of the player base has trailed off to, I don't know, maybe Path of Exile, maybe Lost Ark, maybe whatever it's happening right now. Baldur's Gate, maybe Path of Exile 2 soon. Remember that? We're gonna have Path of Exile 2 soon, which is going to bring so many good features that Diablo 4 doesn't have that people have been asking for, like overlay maps. And another thing has been addressed that's obviously very good, but again, it kind of begs the questions like, are we actually going to see this full situation resolved, which is the stats. First of all, they're essentially putting the spotlight on vulnerable damage, crit damage, and all that. Let's say the OP multiplicative stats that just are the only ones you want on the gear. And we know from when they addressed cooldown reduction as a stat that it can be a big miss if they don't do it right. Because right now, okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Crit and vulnerable being the only really good stats, obviously with a little bit of a caveat here and there, is very boring, because if the gear doesn't have those for all classes, then it's just shit gear. If they nerf it too much, it becomes a situation where you have cooldown reduction, which is still a good stat, which is still something that you want, and vulnerable and crit is still going to be good even if they nerf it, but it just matters like, okay, we don't want it to be that good. It depends how they affect it, because to actually change this, they probably have to go back to the drawing board when designing all the stats, because right now there's over 100 stats in terms of damage modifying abilities. Dude, this is way too many. What are you guys thinking? This is way too many stats, man. Whether or not you like always looking for vulnerable on gear, at least you know what you're looking for. If you're going to be having vulnerable and crit be the same as damage versus slowed, damage versus frozen, then you're just going to have to juggle 100 stats for your gear. Well, not 100, because, you know, you're not gonna juggle werewolf stats for your necromancer, but you get what I'm saying, right? There's just way too many. This spaghetti code has to end. This is not fun gameplay. This is spreadsheet gameplay. I have 3 different spreadsheets if I want to play Diablo semi-seriously and not waste my time. I shouldn't have to play this way. Spreadsheets for aspects, spreadsheets for stats, spreadsheets for dungeons. Dude, what am I playing here? Come on. This is why I'm talking about the fact that this is the last straw for the game to be good. These issues become more and more apparent the more you play. And you've seen all of the videos circling on the internet. It's a meme. It's the meta right now to trash on Diablo 4. And the fact that they're doing these good things that we have been asking for months is a proof that they can actually design the game right. It's not enough. There's still more to be added, but it's proof that this is definitely possible, which means it was possible from the very beginning. Now, why weren't they in the game from the start? And don't give me the, oh, we have to load everybody's stash. What? Excuse me? This is 2023. What do you mean you're giving me an ARPG that costs 70 bucks and I'm not actually engaging with the ARPG concept in its fullest, like actual stash, overlaid map, items that I can filter through and not have to spend 43% of my time in town to actually filter through my loot instead of actually going out and killing stuff. This is unacceptable. And the fact that they're actually able to do it kind of proves that Diablo 4 can actually become a really good ARPG. Remember the Diablo 3 days when it was poop at the release, and Reaper of Souls, Greater Rifts and Bounties, all of it actually made it into a really good game. Maybe one of the best ARPGs at the time, you know, rivaling Path of Exile very closely, but still, it was possible. Is this going to happen with Diablo 4? Are we going to wait until the apocalypse for the game to be good? The game cannot afford to wait. One more season of Malignant Heart level design is going to kill the game for sure, if it isn't already dead now. But hey, listen, at least the Malignant season lets you play your Barbarian right, because the Barber Malignant Heart essentially lets you play about 3 to 4 times more builds just because it's doing what the class is not, essentially covering you AoE, burst, and all of that scaling damage. That was really good. Without it, you probably wouldn't be able to play Barbarian as much. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should check this video where we talk about the best Barbarian leveling builds. And we're gonna have another one soon for you with all of the Barbarian endgame builds that are fun to play. Let's go!